So far, we've covered the head's idea of population control, an association that specializes in stealth and assassination, along with the reappearance of the red mist, Gibura. Next is something more disturbing. Next we have the Queen of Hatred. Tippereth had to deal with one of the most powerful forces in that world. One that can even be the doom of worlds, and doesn't always make sense. Anime come to life! More specifically, the magical girls. Those two brightly and impractically dressed to even fit in around the nests. Now, I've already covered most of them in an anime-themed The Botany Corporation lore video, which included something that won't be appearing on this floor. As for the first one, this gamma-irradiated Toho reject sometimes helped out when things got really bad in the facility. But when things got worse, or when the results weren't as good as they could be, or if enough weren't killed by any method, that's when things would get chaotic. Originally, the magical girl of love, in her pink frilly outfits, the color of trust in Korea, and the color of warriors in Japan. She uses her large wand to take on whatever is thrown at her. That was in the facility, however. In the library, it's different. This magical girl is a bit bipolar. In her human form, she has an existential crisis. She needs evil to fight, and if there's no evil to fight, she becomes the evil that needs to be fought. Yeah. Not a good position to be in. And that's just in her human form. She has another. One that's much more dangerous. In her mini kaiju form, she doesn't care about black and white morality. She desired destruction of those that opposed her, and she sought to bring it in order to justify her own existence. I theorize that the magical girls were either cosplayers that got a bit too into their roles, and lost it when they noticed that reality sucked, and as a result, they lost it. Or they're from another world where anime was real, and they somehow ended up in the world where the Botany Corporation once was, where the grim darkness and the amorality of it corrupted them, due to them seeing things largely in black and white. I've also considered the possibility that they were ordinary citizens of the city that used an old anime series as a means of escape. Well, they wouldn't be the first. And the Botany Corporation's technology that made abnormalities resulted in them transforming, and not in a prolonged and fanservice way, into the parts that they imagined themselves as. Which was exciting at first, but then they lost their minds after, due to them operating on anime logic. Tippereth was one of many that was forced to fight her after she was fooled by her kawaii appearance, which created a false sense of security that was exploited, even though she retained her love of justice. As for her librarians, the Queen of Hatred was considered more trouble than she was worth. This was based on what happened during a Level 2 emergency, when the library was the facility. Considered a total mess. Sounds like someone I'd get on with. I'm joking about that one. It also appears that her definition of peace isn't the same as everyone else's. As for her stage, it's a large city in ruins. Perhaps that's how she sees the world. The world as she'd prefer it. A world in crisis. The only world that has meaning to her. The road was cracked, and the skies were grey, but they became more pink as the hysteria increased. Yes, hysteria was what was needed for her to change into her mini kaiju form. All gained while taking direct damage and losing clashes. Oh yes, and there's something else. Every 4 scenes, the Queen of Hatred charges up the Arcana Slave attack, which results in a bright beam of light attacking everyone. Very hard to overcome, but not impossible. After she was done with that, Tippereth was having problems with something on the floor of natural sciences. Roland asked if she needed help, which resulted in her shouting at him that she could do that by herself. He was surprised that she was able to read all of the books, as just reading the covers made him dizzy. She didn't understand all of it. She labeled them as quantum physics and cell biology, which were difficult subjects for him to understand, never mind her. Tippereth told him that it was hard to recognize the contents of the books from their titles alone. Well, some can be misleading. They might imply one thing, but they could be something else entirely, and that's if they're readable to her. As for Roland, he understood as many didn't even have complete sentences. The completeness of the book depended on the reader. Some weren't stable to begin with, likely because they were written by unstable people. Roland theorized that the completeness might have something to do with some books disappearing upon reading, while others didn't. Tippereth believed that it had something to do with how thoroughly the book was read. Basically, once the contents of a book had been read and understood, it vanished, since it served its purpose. I'm surprised that you understood any of that, considering your background. Yeah. Her background being from around the outskirts. Roland then demonstrated that he had at least some understanding of basic science, specifically light being considered a particle or a wave depending on how it's being observed. The same principle might apply to books. and the reader. This annoyed Tipperef as she told him to stop making weird comparisons with his shoddy knowledge. Hey, he's only trying to help you to make sense of this. She suspects that it just inexplicably works like the singularities do. Roland, and yes, it is how it sounds, told her that she seems proud of her ignorance. She doesn't pretend to understand what she doesn't get, but she still reads and manages the books that he sends there. The same book can show different things each time it's read. Understanding a book completely is a repetitive process. Don't talk about that around Angela. She knows about that better than most. Well, Tipperef doesn't want to stay ignorant forever, as that's just annoying. It's the reason why she needs multiple copies of a single book, as there's a different context each time it's read. It also explains why there are multiple copies of a book available to burn. In the end, she likes the properties of light comparison. She considered it romantic in a way. Don't take that out of context. Perhaps she held enough meaning for Enoch just by staying by his side. She then explained that there was originally 2 Tipperefs in the past. He was there in her second life, and has since stayed dead, thankfully to her. Roland guessed that he was her boyfriend that she was together with for a long time. Roland, that's a sensitive subject, for more reasons than you're aware of. Enoch left her side with both those lives, which Roland assumed was getting dumped twice. He told her to keep her chin up. Like a breakup is the end of the world. Roland, firstly, that's already there in the form of distortions. Secondly, is it too late for you to aim for his groin, Tipperef? The reason I say this is Tipperef told Roland that he died and he couldn't be put in such light terms. Yeah, that's bad taste. He then apologized for this. I doubt that he would have put it like that if he knew. Tipperef was surprisingly forgiving. She bid farewell to him a second time. She believed that he found the meaning he was looking for, that their lives and sacrifices weren't in vain, that people died so easily, and dying a meaningless death was not what they were born for. Roland couldn't understand that. As for Tipperef, hers is to complete the light so that it can be used properly, which was made from Lobotomy Corporation's singularity, where manifestations of the mind can be dissolved back into a formless concept and seep into people's minds. The light that was gathered over 50 days to cure the disease of the mind that was afflicting the city. The energy company was a front. The energy generation was gained from a mix of abnormalities created as a side effect of their singularity, well, most of them anyway. They generated enkephalin, when they were worked with, when they caused pain to employees. Yeah, physical and emotional. Think about it. Their lives were given meaning using that metric, as Arthur Schopenhauer would put it. Roland was surprised that the enkephalin batteries were made from monster produce. He even used lighters filled with that to smoke. I guess you don't do that anymore. Many of the abnormalities were originally human, and many employees died to gather that enkephalin. Roland saw this as little different to any of the others. A company that massacres to cure. A cliche for all that spread about the wings. And they're probably all true. And you've just not heard all of it. Tippereff suspected that they were not much different from Elcor, although she didn't know for sure. Roland can confirm to her that they are. It's the kind of cycle that they want to break. Roland saw the light as a form of brainwashing people. That implies that it's mind control, which it isn't. And when Tippereff heard this from Roland, she was not pleased. In fact, she was offended by this simple conclusion. Roland saw it as a matter of perspective. Tippereff only knows the general outline. If cycles were really happening out there, she wanted to know. She wanted to know more about the world, like Angela does. Roland then told Miss Tiff that he'll bring the right books for her, and then left her to do things in other parts of the library, as it's not just her that he has to deal with. Next we have the 8 o'clock circus. Entertainment is so limited in the city, isn't it? Some are desperate to be amused, never mind make it into show business. Then again, some don't dream of anything, never mind have the means to make that dream a reality. Some are so desperate that they'll go for any path, no matter how questionable or dangerous, to make that happen. That is what the 8 o'clock circus is. A band of performers that perform around 8 o'clock, but they have a dark secret. And it's not intellectual flatulence. It's not because it's full of sexual deviance. It's not even because it was full of those knowledgeable of outmoded folk dance routines. It's something less conventional than that. Their role in this story starts with a show that has been broadcast to those able to watch it, to make them laugh to their heart's content, and maybe they'd have a good eternity sleep. Was he telling them to embrace death, whoever was saying this, when it comes to them? He even hinted at regular viewers might be on their stage in person. He'd find it so delightful. He would bring more laughter to those watching his show on TV, the same time the next day. He then ended it with, "Nail your head, everyone, and have a bloomy, splody night." Hard to tell if he was just taking the... District 10 is big on gambling. In fact, you could consider it to be a Korean Las Vegas. Many deals and bets are made there. And when there are disputes, that's when Ruina Association and its affiliated fixer offices need to step in to clear up which bets are legitimate and which are not. Their weapons are intended in case negotiations break down and things get violent, as they often do with the coffins being brought out of rooms. I speak of this because sometime after the 8 o'clock Circus' show, deep within the mountain trail outside the city, Emma and Noah, 2 corporate drones from J-Corps, were having problems. Noah was bothered by what her boss said. Yeah, the nitpicking, which there was enough of as it was. And this was due to them making an error. Apparently it was due to one of the screens being missed. In the darkest nook and cranny at the edge of the row of monitors. And it turned out that where they were working was understaffed. And with the amount that was there, it was next to impossible to check all of the monitors. Yeah, they're basically pit bosses, but with less authority and likely with pay that sucks. It's why they're both out there, as she needed to clear her thoughts, and they could both use death sticks, or cigarettes as they were known as. Well, they're usually known as, I call them death sticks. Which was why they were lost in the woods. Yeah, not because they had something to do out there. Noah didn't want to say it, but Emma, a friend of 5 years, didn't want to pretend that this wasn't a problem. There are few out there that would consider each other friends in that city, especially the corporate kind of person. Well, as Emma would put it, at least they're in an open area. And apparently, it was Noah's fault that they were lost. It appeared that whatever she's good at, navigation is not one of them. Emma thought that the dark was the reason why Noah was going in the wrong direction. Noah was worried about something else, as regular maintenance was ending in an hour, and they were unlikely to make it back before it ended. Emma then asked the question that the truly ignorant and irresponsible would ask. What's the worst that could happen? Getting tired? Yeah. The worst that could happen is getting kicked out of the nest and thrown into the back streets. Or if you already live in the back streets, getting kicked out of your apartments and at the lack of mercy of the sweepers when the night of the back streets come. Noah considered that a vicious joke. While Emma wouldn't have to worry about that, Noah did. Their chief was enough already. In fact, they might even be preparing the paperwork for their dismissal, if it's not gone through already. Even Emma's offer of help didn't make her feel better. Reach her dreams? Things better than staring at boring screens all day? Talent? I think you're confusing Noah for someone who has dreams. She's also got dignity, as she's not some call girl, a doll for the rich to play with. She gave up on her dreams long ago, and then Emma stopped like a deer before a car. Wait, there are cars in that world? Yeah, Emma saw a tent. Well, that's convenient. Noah thought it was someone setting up camp. It was worth checking out, to both of them. Even though Noah was nervous, Emma thought that it might be a good idea to ask if they know a way out. They arrived at a dilapidated circus. Then they encountered a man dressed as a jester with a mask on his face. The show had ended by the time they arrived. Noah was frightened by him, but he told them where they were and who he was. It was the 8 o'clock circus, giving smiles to the smelly city dwellers. Yeah, rub it in, why don't you? We know that it's there. As for his name, he considered it long past the archaic era of introducing each other with names, but there was no need to worry about intrusion. He then said to sniff each other's wrists instead. This creeped out Noah. And this one was known as Oswald, and he was disturbing. And yes, he was disturbed by this. He then said something about rubbing lemons on everyone's tongues. Yeah, that makes about as much sense as the entire timeline of the Kingdom Hearts series. Actually, rubbing lemons on everyone's tongues is easier to understand. He understood that Emma was curious about the circus. Emma saw giant balls, instruments, a lion, and an elephant as well. All this caught Noah's attention as well. Apparently, the book that Noah read said something about where they were. That circuses passed into history long ago. And there are doubts that it was due to animal rights activists and purity spirals. It's probably due to something far worse and far heavily impacting than either of them. Oswald offered to take them on a special once-in-a-lifetime field trip, apparently feeling so stale. Noah thought that he was talking nonsense, although she agreed when Emma told her that they don't have a way of knowing where to go, and Noah's bound to be fired anyway. He then warned about the angry flowers. Wrong game, Oswald. I mean, it isn't even the one where there's a clown there that's more barking than you. At least in some ways. Inside the circus tent, Oswald introduced them to Mr. Lion, one that seemed cold and sharp, but is soft and warm like a fur coat. Yeah. Which, to Emma, looked like a lion, but to Noah, the 5-star reviews about his belly were all in Oswald's head, as the teeth were oddly round and blunt. Then Oswald introduced them to Mr. Elephant, one that made the loudest noise in the circus, one that sung so much all the time, they gave him candy to keep quiet. Oswald, reporting for noise pollution is the least of your circus's problems. Not just because it's not even close to the city's limits. Oswald was talking about the massive ant nest beneath them. Mrs. Ant doesn't like Mr. Elephant's noise pollution. Yeah, that's definitely the reason to shut him up. Others include Miss Mermaid, Miss Hexagonal Cone Hat, Mr. Knife, and many others. Bizarrely, Miss Mermaid joined them because she was so scared of the sea, so she moved to land. Due to the twisted logic that the sea predators couldn't get to her there. Well, one thing we can't accuse him of being is completely sane. There again, I can talk. Noah didn't get that. And Oswald considered her to have cold rice for brains. Well, rice is a staple in parts of Asia. He thought it bonkers to live in the sea, where mermaids were part fish, and fish eats other fish all the time, which briefly made him go out of character. Upon hearing this, Noah was getting more and more concerned. Emma considered Mr. Lemon Clown, as he called him, to have the coolest circus that he's ever seen. Well, according to Noah, there's no competition now. He felt drawn to it, that it spoke to his heart. Yeah, that's a cause for concern. Noah thought that this was crazy. Emma didn't approve of her sour attitude about such a wonderful place. I didn't think your job was that bad. He wanted to see what they did to make people smile in those tough times. Were there ever easy times? Noah wanted to leave him in that insanity, not wanting a part in that rare chance, although not to join them. He just wanted to watch the show. Oswald saw this as a shame. Everyone left him, except his secret pals. I wonder why. It included the mermaid who snacks on jelly beans inside seashells, a hamster who's so tall he can drink clouds off the sky. Apparently he wanted to bring smiles to people who caught the attention of Miss Sun, who whispered to him that she'd make his wish come true. Yeah, I think Miss Sun has issues. If this is how you saw this as making your wish come true. He snapped it up, where he frolicked with his secret pals, living the dream, joyfully performing at the circus with his friends every night. It was starting to appeal to Noah. Yes, and Oswald noticed this as well. At this point, she asked if she could really be happy if she joined them. Apparently, every moment of her life would be filled to the brim with the thrilling taste of pepper. Not the best description, but I think he meant that their lives wouldn't be boring. Noah then hinted that she was currently in a nest, and seeing as she had nothing to lose now, as she was going to be fired regardless of what she did, and she didn't want to go back to the back streets. So she was originally from there. It was also a living hell working for J Corp anyway. Her dream was an empty one as long as she was at the bottom. Even when she clawed her way up, she was staring at boring screens. Up until that point. Emma wanted to know what he could help Noah with. Noah thought that he was making fun of her, as if money can solve her problems. He followed her into that department. The reason for that was, well, at that point, she didn't care. She wanted to ask where she could sign up. You sure that you want to do that? The lion has human teeth. I mean, do you not consider that odd? Emma, on the other hand, was not so eager. Oswald offered to help them get rid of the Mimi tears. They'll be friends when they open their eyes. He then did something, and that resulted in something happening after they were awake. Apparently, he wanted to try placing a well-cooked drumstick on their nose. If they slept any longer, well, Noah was complaining about her eyes. There was too much going on. It was all to fulfill her dream of witnessing the world from a higher place. This resulted in Emma being a blind giant and Noah being a literal four-eyed living ventriloquist puppet. Let's hope she doesn't have an opening with his hand up her. Moving swiftly on, they were both dressed for that Norleon festival known as Mardi Gras. This was to allow Emma to help Noah in a way that isn't related to material wealth. He knew so little. Life passed him by. As for how Oswald felt about this, well, he was happy that they liked the gifts that he gave them. He would. And then he wanted them to do something for him, as he mentioned the Wedge office, but not by name, attacking his tent, referring to them swallowing his friends whole, which is likely talking about them spearing them to death. They killed Miss Hippo and Mr. Ball, which made him frown as long as 3 sausages. Probably not Cumberland sausages, as those would make his frown quite a bit longer. It also ruined his palace. They found that out as they went into the library. Also willing to follow one that, even at first glance, doesn't sound like he's the picture of mental health. Which is how many of them likely distorted in the first place. Although it can vary from individual to individual. Right, where were we? Oh yes, the library. He was talking about the wedge office going into the library. The circus couldn't move their hearts. He wanted Emma and Noah to retrieve their books to find out where he went wrong, so that he could put their flowers with his tricks and acts, to provide a show that would shake even their souls. It's clear that Emma and Noah had their minds altered by whatever Oswald did to them. They were willing to help him hold an even grander circus, resulting in praise from the deranged ringmaster, in the form of a clown that looks like a bigger version of the Crimson Dawn ordeal. He's even willing to throw a party to celebrate that, if they returned. Yeah, he understands the risks. He even speaks about the cocktail garnished with a piece of a cloud and lion's mane chili fries. No, he's not on drugs. This is his mental state. In case it isn't obvious by now, Noah was willing to go. Emma was willing to go with whatever Emma was going with. As for what happened after they left, Oswald decided to prepare a feast that would make their teeth groan, so one with plenty of sugar. Well, anything American would probably do for that. He also needed to recruit more members for his circus, to make up for those killed by the wedge office, and also in case those he sent into the library don't return, along with practice with Miss Mermaid's scale mane. For whatever reason. It was then that Philip appeared after his fight alongside the wedge office, while manifesting his partial EGO towards the end of it. It seemed to be a slow teleport, where time is harder to identify, as the order of guests is player determined, so it could be that it took a while for him to reach that location, or it was meant to be started immediately after the wedge office guest group. He was disoriented regardless. Oswald thought that he was either a clown or another audience member. Have you looked in the mirror lately? Oswald considered it good either way with his jesting visitor. Entertaining him would be easy as chewing pie-flavored gum. The movie They Live had a line about gum that applies to this situation. Something that Philip should really do to Oswald around this point. He was in deep as he was at the 8 o'clock circus, bringing the bestest of the smells to the people of the city who have lost their flower stalks. Yeah, that's how Oswald put it. And someone was going to lose it, and it was not going to be him, as it's too late for him to lose it, as that's already happened. Hard to know who to feel more sorry for. But if you want to know how the story is going to continue, it's going to have to wait, as they were watching this, Roland was wondering where Philip went, dropped at a place where it would have been better for him to have been killed in the library. He wanted to know more about the nut job of a clown and what he was up to. The invitation cut things short at odd times, or rather at odd timings. Angela explained that he's not the guest group, and the invitation shows them what they need to see, which isn't always what they want to see. Yeah. He decided to put that aside for now and focused on Emma and Noah, a tall blind guy and a short woman with 4 eyes. Neither seem normal, and this is a city that was once powered by eldritch horrors bringing pain to Elcor employees. Angela was more focused on understanding why someone needed the help from another to stand high. Roland explained that unless you're born to a rich family, you don't have much of a choice with that. As without money, intelligence counts for nothing in that city. Or, as Angela would put it, hard work alone doesn't bring recognition. Roland confirms that. Well, it's usually the case. Angela then saw that theoretically having money would lead to happiness, but Emma proved that false. He was angry rather than happy, as if he saw no meaning to it. Roland suspected that it might be his last bit of pride, the fear of earning reputation of avarice and buying his friends. It could also hurt more than it helped. I mean, it varies from person to person. I mean, just because someone can give money to help the one that they help, well, it can make them feel upset and slighted at the same time due to being seen as a charity case. As Noah felt that she was being seen as. Yeah, you give up your dreams just to survive, and your friend is able to give away money like it's nothing. That person is basically dragging that rich friend into your messy life by relying on them to get financial help. It's morally distressing, not to mention emotionally. It also makes you feel resentful, at least towards yourself, as if your ability was worth anything, why would you need financial help from someone? Why can't you just pay for it yourself? Angela theorized that the friend simply wanted to help, but didn't know the best way to do it. Yeah, if only it was that simple. Which, of course, it isn't. Roland sums it up to it's how the receiver takes it, regardless of the intent. Well, the road to hell is quite varied in places, but is often paved with good intentions. He saw the guests that willingly joined the freak show as desperate to achieve their dreams. Well, if they had nothing left to lose, why not? As they were going to lose their jobs. And Noah was about to return to the back streets, so she probably decided, what the? Why shouldn't I do this? I'd only get lost again anyway. Roland saw the world as big enough to fit in all kinds of freaks, all needing a refuge from quite a harsh reality, although the body that the clothing was hiding was enough to make him feel like vomiting. Thankfully, Angela stopped him from doing so and told him to focus on the reception. Emma couldn't see, so he didn't know that he was in the library on arrival. Noah told him that they were inside it and guided him up the stairs. Noah noticed that for a place full of monsters, it's surprisingly nice and clean. Emma considered it big and fancy, not as much as their circus, but his head wasn't bumping on any ceilings. Yeah, it's that big. At that point, Angela greeted them. Emma then shouted at her, asking if she can hear his voice. Thankfully, her audio receptors were fine, and she told them that she could hear them, and there was no need to be shouting, especially as she's right below them, and that Noah was up close to Emma, and it's much worse, presumably. Emma thought that those below wouldn't be able to hear him, due to being so tall. You're not that big. He then told Angela that he'll invite her to their next performance, if they get all the books that they came there for. Noah, seeing them as having the secret of making more people happy, to turn even her cold stare into a hearty smile, promising to bring her happiness. Now, that'd be quite an achievement, as Roland has, well, he's failed miserably so far. Angela then let them in. Emma came from a more well-off family, so getting a job wasn't exactly a worry for him. It was just something for him to do. He works as a corporate drone for G-Corp. Their singularity was the ability to lock anything physically or conceptually, from small boxes to protect personal objects, to an area of space or even bodies, to prevent it from being tampered with in any way, such as by organ harvesters. The price varying depending on what needs to be locked. F-Corp has its fairies, which does the exact opposite. He's also aware of G-Corp's singularity, gravity-controlling spheres, and what he thinks is W-Corp's singularity, which is a fast and reliable transportation method that delivers you relatively quickly, regardless of distance. there'll be more on that later. J-Corp's singularity was likely created due to J-Corp being what is essentially a Korean Las Vegas, as in where gambling is a thriving business. And the only thing that's not thriving are those that are hired by them. That and those that go in there and lose their money quickly, hastening their eviction into the back streets. And a significantly lower life expectancy than those already there. As we just saw, money isn't important to him, and not just due to his background. As for Noah, she was a former backstreet denizen that somehow got into J-Corp, likely through one of those examinee towns. A dream come true for many of them, at least at first. As for what she and Emma did, they were glorified pit bosses as they checked the security cameras to make sure that no one was cheating, along with receiving calls about things that are worth their attention, such as those using sleight of hand to switch cards, table rigging, and using heavier marbles for the roulettes. Yeah, there's bound to be a double standard in there, as when it's the customer doing this, it's wrong. But when it's those that work there, that's okay. And fixers affiliated with Wi-Fi Association are those called in to settle disputes, peacefully if possible. What makes it worse for her is that she has nothing to fall back on. If she loses her job, and believe me, her job has some unreasonable expectations, as she has to check the feeds of tens and even hundreds of rooms that have 10 cameras each, with too few to watch all of them effectively. Honestly, J-Corp management expects more results with less manpower. I mean, she did have dreams once, but has since given up on them. The library fought Emma Noah, along with the lion with its sharp claws, the monkey with its pointy things, and the elephant that was disturbing the local ant population around the 8 o'clock circus. But after killing Noah, Emma was more easily killed after. After that battle, Roland remarked that Emma might have broken the library's entrance. As for Oswald, he asked Angela if he has something to do with the Blue Reverberation's gang of musicians. Angela considered it too early either way, as he had different motives to the Blue Reverberation and those affiliated with him, although she suspects that he's similar to those associated with Argalia, as he's clearly not like an ordinary human, implying that he's distortion. Well, considering what a few of them can do, it's a distinct possibility. The urban nightmare continues, with something more aggressive and shooty Until next time. Hail the rabbit!